Okay, it looks like we are live.
Outstanding. So Lonnie Douglas here with the Eugene Springfield Solidarity Network, joined with Anne Fournier,
Fournier.
Fournier
Yeah.
from the Solidarity Action Network, which is associated as our 501c4 associated with ESSN. We are here with Matthew Yook, who is running for Eugene Mayor. Got that right, Matthew?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, excellent. So why don't we go ahead? First, I want to let everybody know that these interviews are not an endorsement of any candidate. We're putting these out here so that voters are able to engage with candidates and learn a little bit more about them. With the COVID outbreak that we have going on, candidates aren't allowed to or able to go knock on doors, really engage with the public as easily. We hope this will help people to make a little bit more informed decision when their ballots come out. So Matthew, we're going to give you 3 to 4 minutes. Go ahead and tell us who you are, why we should vote for you.
Howdy, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much, Solidarity Action Network, for giving me an opportunity to get this out there. I'm a longtime resident of Eugene, went to South Eugene High School, was in the IHS program, and so with so many years here, I've seen a lot of change. I've seen and heard a lot of stories, lived a lot of stories, of a lot of different iterations. I mean, I wasn't even going to run for mayor, but then some of the answers and solutions I had to them really resonated with people. So I decided, wow, 25 signatures and $100 getting voters pamphlet? Okay, let's try pushing this envelope. Let's see what we can do for the people as the people, right? As opposed to coming from some type of lobbying, endorsing style of campaigning. I wanted to see what my messages could resonate with folk, to see if they could get excited again about politics, about local politics, about a mayoral race, right? I mean, I believe that we can enact the most effective, impactful change in local politics compared to other ones that we're so embattled and entrenched with, right? Like the current primary that's ran almost 3 years, right, before we even have the general election. And so trying to refocus back on representative mechanisms that we the people can get behind, that we the people can support and can participate and be a part of, right, is very, very important to me. And so that's the main reason why I decided I had to toss my cap in, to get this race started. I mean, to run for mayor, sorry, not to get this race started. I guess I'm already in the race, so I got over 20 years of experience as well. I started over on, sorry, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. So my first organizing experience was at Augsburg at Lane Community College, organizing around issues for the students, for the Eugene community, becoming the board chair and the hunger and homeless advocacy coordinator, which was really rad opportunity because I got to meet a lot of folks up at LCC and in the community that had been doing so much work around outreach and support to some of those most in need. We worked with Food for Lane County. We coordinated a bunch of the Whitaker community dinners. I got a lot of different organizations at LCC that had classically not been involved with that on board, which was really fantastic, I thought, and what community needs to do to come together as a community college. From there, I joined up with APISU, the Asian Pacific Islander Student Union, where I started out as chair because we had to reinvigorate it. I then switched to treasurer as I recruited an executive staff, so that way I wouldn't have to be chair to get it going. Switched to treasurer, then ran for student government of ASLCC, where I got to meet even more folk involved in Eugene and Lane County's community. Through the administration of Lane Community College, I talked to a lot of folks from a lot of different backgrounds and had to try to share messages as a representative of students of Lane Community College, which, as you all might know, is a non-traditional college. The average student age there was 28 at the time. And so trying to communicate to Lane community residents about issues that I was learning in a college setting, which was a little more removed from that day-to-day experience folks were struggling through, why folks were at Lane Community College, to get that job with benefits, to get some retirement, get some healthcare. And so figuring out ways that I could plug them into the resources to have them achieve their goal and get to where they needed to was a fantastic feeling. And it got them excited about what they could do. And so bringing that over to Eugene governance, to city and civic engagement, I think is something that is sorely lacking. A lot of the energy we have is divisive and then structured in a way that we're excluded from commenting civically. With the city council being the only interface the public really has to discuss city governance, we have an issue of the city manager rolling out all the details that impact and affect our day-to-day life that we don't get a chance to talk to. We don't get to hear back from city councilors. And so one of the main things, going to city meetings, talking to folk, hearing their grumbles, or talking to folk that can't even make it on a school night during dinner time to downtown Eugene, right? Like, that's a tall order for parents, I think. I mean, and so opening that up is one of the main reasons why I wanted to start running. I think we need to embrace technology so that way folks can feel heard, so that way government can be held accountable and transparent. Of course, this was because I was looking at how did the Gordon Loft, a luxury apartment, get a property tax break when people have years-long waiting lists to get into low-income housing. It was impossible to find that on the website, and I'm pretty okay with computers and navigating things. And so if they had a recording, a broadcast, or a podcast like Lane County of Governance already does for city council and budget committee meetings, we could totally translate that over to all those other meetings that are public but aren't televised. Then we could open them up for public commentary so people could drop the commentary at those meetings, hear those reasons and decisions why that was not included, even if it was a good idea, right? And that is something that is sorely lacking in city governance. There's also the other ideas I had talking about, right? That really got me excited to run for mayor. I mean, my Green New Deal, where we need to really focus on getting manufacturing for Eugene that is 21st century, making some solar panels, making some batteries. It was originally going to be in the Hynix plant, but oh my gosh, sorry. My website, www.yookformayor.com. Please check out more. I've got platforms and icons and clicky things. It's pretty cool.
All right. Ann, you want to take the first question?
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to, so that we could get on to some of these questions we have to focus so that you can address certain aspects of your policy platform.
Oh,
So
thank
the
you.
first thing that we want to talk about is housing and homelessness in Eugene, because it's not going to take a crystal ball to see that the current recession is going to exacerbate our already bad housing crisis and force even more Eugene residents onto the streets. So my question is, how are you going to respond both to the immediate spike in homelessness and housing instability, but also what measures are you going to take over the longer term to help Eugene's unhoused residents?
I think that that's part of the same discussion as opposed to immediate steps that we need to take. We've thrown down some immediate responses in the wake of this COVID-19 pandemic, which were considered unfeasible before. We can't do that. That's just not tenable. Suddenly, I mean, it's horrible. It took it took a global pandemic for Eugene to finally find the resources to make these insta-camps happen. And while some of them are in community centers, and I can see that not being a sustainable model from here on out, the exploration that we have done to find those spots, like this is Springfield side, right? But they were talking about turning the Willamette Center into a permanent shelter for unhoused folk with sanitary services, which is rad. And so seeing that it took a global pandemic to make this happen, but seeing that it can happen, I think is something that we need to build on. Chris McAllister had a beautiful idea of incorporating those micro spaces where folks could camp and self-organize and self-coordinate with some other intervening oversight just to make sure that it was healthy and safe. And this replication of that model I see being done in community centers now, confronting this COVID pandemic, is something I definitely see could be done in some vacant areas or vacant lots. And that could then be built up more with long-term plans and community buy-in. And so that's why I see it as being connected at this point. The one thing that we're trying to fight for as a county, getting the motels to open up like California has Motel 6, is an issue that is very short term for sure. And so, okay, I guess I got to backtrack a little bit. The houselessness pandemic we had, or sorry, houselessness epidemic we had before the pandemic ties into the immediate reactionary measures we've had to put into place now. The only thing is that as COVID-19 has done for a lot of those things about to break in society, it has shown how quickly they broke and how bad not having housing and not having hand washing stations for a sector of population that's in interaction with other people is not the best way to deal with a global pandemic where you need to wash your hand. And so with a lot of folks having upset at the collapse of a lot of camps already, and then they're even being bulldozing now of current camps after there was supposed to be a moratorium on that by the city of Eugene. I've been a little behind in finding out exactly where all those other pieces are, like what hotels are resisting, if there's any way we could get like hazmat stuff for folk cleaning that, because that's a thing, which is understandable. I mean, I hate the stigma, but we want to make sure people are safe, and we want to make sure if we have the resources available to house unhoused folks under roofs that are vacant, we do. And so then in the long term, after that, we have so many unhoused folks. It doesn't take a crystal ball. Housing is not a Gordian knot, right? Like, we need more units. And so instead of just the 350 that the TAC report suggested we needed, I want to do 1,000 high density, low income, low barrier units to help house families, help house people that are chronically unable to even move up from low income. There's such a huge gap between low income apartments and affordable apartments, if you will, at least the tag that folks put on affordable in real estate. And so until we address that gap, the years-long waiting list for low-income apartments will still be years long for folks on fixed incomes, for families. And so we need to focus on bottom-up development. Before luxury departments get a tax break, we need to build a 7-story retail on the bottom unit that can house folks immediately. And through this bottom-up development style, I think that we will push accessibility, affordability, availability up to the bottom, and that's what we need to do. Trickle down doesn't work in economics or housing.
Great, thank you. So we're going to get more into taxes with the next question, but I just had a quick follow-up question about funding, because, I mean, as you know, like I said, the city government, we can't run deficits like the federal government. What measures do you endorse for raising the funding for this? Do you support like raising the construction excise tax or additional levies and bond measures? What fundraising methods do you propose for funding these projects?
I think that there's some coordination and deep diving on public funding mechanisms that Homes for Good has done in the past year that have been phenomenal. I wish I knew more details about what those resources were and where they're going. While they're a county agency, they tie very closely with Eugene land use, zoning, and urban development. And so definitely more construction excise tax. The fact that it's below what the state allowed it to be is a ridiculous thing when thinking about the demand for homes is there. We don't need to make it more affordable for people to build them. We just need them to be built. People are going to buy them, right? And so this idea that we need to make a scarce model of production, a scarce model of, providing housing, so that way folks can make more profit off of them, as opposed to using our resources now to house people here now, is very problematic. And I can understand, because we definitely want to encourage more people to come in so we can actually generate some tax revenue. And so construction excise tax, I actually had a great idea, right, before this whole COVID thing came down, of doing a lodging tax for only the next few years, where we had the track trials come in. So that way we could suddenly make some profit as a city off these giant events, opposed to just hemorrhaging more money. I think that would be a great revenue, great source of capital. Couple years down the line now, just because of extenuating circumstances, of course, but that was going to be one of my main funding mechanisms and models. I was actually reaching out to restaurants too for a restaurant tax, like Yacht Huts has, that has over a certain ticket amount, you get a tax. And so folks going there for lunch and dinner, right, that are Eugenians, they wouldn't be taxed on it. But if folk were coming in and being like, yeah, I'm treating you all these blah, 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 blah. Well, pay some more to support Eugene. And so I think that would have been a great idea, right? And yeah, we need, I'm sorry, we need more fees for selling real estate. There's such a huge markup that people are making on selling real estate that we aren't even gaining, except for trying to rake people over for more property tax when the majority of people here can't afford more. And so, yeah, yeah. And so if we're gonna give property tax breaks, like MUPTI, they need to go to low income, low barrier, high density units, much like the light does right now that you can't apply for in Eugene. So the low income tax exemption you can't get, but MUPTI, yeah. And so I don't know. Tax structures and funding for housing are very twisted. Like HB 2001, right? Sorry.
All right. You want to ask the next question, Lonnie?
Next question. I want to point one thing out. Anne is a very good timekeeper.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If I'm just trying to keep things like running at a, not going over too much, but don't feel like you have to end in the middle of your sentence or anything. That if I lift my hand, that just means like we want to wrap up your sentence, wrap up your thought, and then we can move on. It's okay. I don't mean to cut you off.
I'm very pedantic.
No problem.
And so sometimes I just start rambling, and so no worries.
Cool.
No
All
problem.
right.
I need to get messages out there.
So our next question we've got is about the payroll tax. Last June, the city council voted to implement a payroll tax in Eugene. They decided not to refer this, pretty controversial tax to the voters. One, what's your stance on payroll taxes in general? And do you agree with the council's decision to not refer it to the voters, not allow us to vote on it?
Payroll taxes are a tricky boat. Oregon's funding structures are very limited. Our levers are very limited. I mean, we do only have income tax and property tax outside of grants from federal government to help support some of the things we need to do as a state, which then of course go through state mechanisms, go down to our city mechanisms. And so until we figure out ways where we're not giving tax exemptions to luxury apartments, then, then I mean, I see that we should probably, sorry, I made that entirely backwards. Oh my gosh. If we can find ways to give tax breaks to luxury apartments, we can find ways to not regressively enact a payroll tax that we know the voters wouldn't want, which is why the city council did it as they did. And so it's a little problematic on that one. Because, yeah, I mean, I respect the role of government for many things it provides. I mean, I'll go out and say it. I'm a pretty devout Keynesian as far as things go in our current structure. That the deficit spending you were mentioning, as long as the government is pouring that into creating more prosperity, more revenue, and more freedoms for the people, well, dang, that redistribution model is a lot more effective than we've seen charity, than we've seen philanthropists be. Like, wait, you donated your salary, which is a fraction of how much you earn an hour? Wow, how can that be the accolades we give? And so payroll taxes in Oregon being one of the only ways I wished it was not regressive, the fact that wages have not kept up with the cost of living, that, I mean, if you're, is another piece of that, because folks are getting taxed and hurt, and they're already taxed enough in Oregon because our income tax structure is from the early 1900s. Like, our highest marginal rates are very bad, which, while not directly impacting Eugene, again, go to that money coming down from the state side, which would then help us shore up our gaps without having to tax payroll of people that don't even live in Eugene, right? One of the worst things about it, if you don't even live in Eugene, but you work in Eugene, you got taxed. And I don't even really understand why it had to go to public safety police to deal with our expanding population when there should be mechanisms put into construction and building sales that fund public services that they will then be tapping into, I think, as opposed to taxing more folks here. We need to have it relative to the growth that is requiring that much more. I don't know the exact numbers of how to make that work, but yeah, the taxing thing. Sorry, I totally lost track. What was the second part?
I don't know. I was so busy listening to you. I forget. I have to look at it. Oh, do you agree with the city council's decision to not refer it to the voters?
No. And that ballot measure that was so backwards. If you vote yes, it means no on a yes of something that doesn't really matter right now. Because if we try this again, that's probably not going to work.
Okay. All right.
You brought up income taxes. I'm just wondering, there are some American cities who have income taxes. Do you think an income tax would be a good idea in Eugene?
No. I think that we were still $700 under median 2006 incomes for Eugene, or almost 700, sorry. It was like 685, I think, in 2019. Like, and that's not adjusted for inflation, right? I mean, so like inflation makes that even more, that $700, I think. And yeah, so we can't be taxing income. I mean, we've got to find new ways and mechanisms to fund things. And so one thing that's kind of sketchy is thinking about a sales tax on not food, not medicine, and not like necessary products, right? So that way folks buying TVs and whatnot, or even eating out, right? Like non-essential sales tax could be one of the ways, since we are only one of, a few states that don't have a sales tax, which is one reason why we keep hitting these funding issues constantly, I feel, especially as wages get reduced, but people still keep consuming. And so that's a very tricky thing to even talk about here right now. Like, I did not say advocate for a sales tax, y'all. Except, I mean, if we're getting realistic about consumption habits, about where money is going, I definitely think we need to reanalyze how folks are paying to support the models and the infrastructure that allow them to practice that business. Because I think there's a lot of forgetting of, wow, wait, if we didn't have those roads, like people couldn't buy their stuff. And so that's why we need taxes, right? I mean, how much is too much? Hey, y'all, that's what we need to figure out together.
Thanks for that. No, that's good. If it's okay with you, Lonnie, since we touched on affordable housing earlier, so I would, if it's all right, since we don't have all the time in the world, I was thinking we could skip to the fourth question, which is talking about conflicts in actually building that affordable housing. Because right now, I mean, the need to incentivize affordable housing development can place the various stakeholders involved, the landowners and developers, the affordable housing activists, and labor groups at odds. So how are you going to manage conflict both between those various groups and more generally between the interests of Eugene's 1% and the interests of the rest of the community?
Wow, there was a lot of weight to that question. I think, again, as I was trying to espouse a little in my opening statement, that I've got a pretty good history of talking with folks, trying to understand what they're wanting, and then meeting them at what level they are accessible at. Because I understand that, they know more than I do about stuff. I know more than they do about stuff. And so figuring out where we can meet has been one of my favorite skills I think I actually got to develop in all my community organizing and my outreach and my leadership and advocacy. And so finding those places we can relate, because we know that if we present people the numbers that we need housing, folks can understand we need housing. And so then we've got to analyze what are the numbers people are working with. Like, what is the budget to build a 7-story apartment building? And then how much of those costs are actually going to be needed to be deferred or subsidized? There's a lot of committees kind of working on, is this economically feasible to allow some of the tax grants that we give out for local development and construction? The problem is that a lot of them are consisting of property owners, construction people, and folks that are looking to profit as opposed to provide more housing. With a model where we have so much demand for housing right now, I think illustrating that as eloquently as possible, with as much raw data as possible, to everyone, to make sure that if you are interested in this discussion, you are going to be on the same level. I feel the TAC report was a good step towards that. I feel that, as you were saying, we don't need a crystal ball to say that that's probably going to be inadequate, especially in the wake of COVID-19. And so making sure that we understand what land can be developed, making sure that HB 2001 is rolled out for those different stakeholders in a way that they can buy into is something that is something I'm excited to figure out where we can meet on that. But there's been not the best oversight thus far. Looking at the capstone, looking at how Gordon Loft got that MUFTI grant, and so making sure that everyone, again, that is involved or excited about it is on that same page, is saying, this is what we're proposing to do. This is the funding we have for it. These are the resources we're putting into it. This is the reason why. And then see how that works. I think there's too much saying, we need this, we need that, from those different sectors, from the 1%, the rest Eugene, and housing advocates. When the 1%, of course, are wanting to help generate more economy for economy's sake, which is very much needed in our current state as Oregon and our current state as Eugene. And so trying to figure out how to do that in ways that aren't profiting off the people here is a discussion I'm hoping more are amicable or amenable to. Doing it around housing, doing it around zoning, doing it around multi-unit development might definitely be one of those channels we could open up. This whole mortgage, land ownership, rent discussion happening under COVID-19 is a good time for us to reassess what we value as property, where Eugene gets his property value from, and then again, what we need to build for and to. The only way I see approaching these community-wide gigantic issues is by making sure the community is there. And so I'm a big fan of unions. I'm a big fan of public construction. I'm a big fan of requiring apprentices on all those sites. I'm not a fan of how easy it can be to shirk your obligation to a tax credit you got. And so if there was a way we could ensure that wouldn't happen moving forward with some of the mechanisms we have now, might be more tenable. But again, looking at Capstone, I mean, I'm not thinking so much. I'm trying to find out more about this Willamette Greenway development as well. Like, is that market rate apartments getting a tax break in an opportunity zone, in fact, that people here in Eugene can't afford? If so, that I can understand why people are upset about that and why they're out there organizing around it. But if that discussion doesn't make it back to the top, if that discussion doesn't make it out to the people, then how can we say this is what people in this community are excited about? And so I'd want to make sure that like, if we can all start at the same level, that same information, that same page of transparency, we won't be trying to shout over each other, trying to say like, no, that's wrong. Because we can say like, no, this is literally what is happening. How do we address that? That is something that Eugene City Council and Eugene City governance, I think could use more motivation to do. One thing I hear about leadership being bandied about. And so motivating folks to make sure that they're there and they're understood and that they are heard is going to be the first step I would proactively take. Making sure that you can't yell at someone because you don't agree with them. Like, that's got to be one of the first fundamental steps we take. While it's hard in this day and age of reactionary, vitriolic exchanges about, oh, you non-believer. Well, but we all believe in like life, right? And living. Like, I believe in me and my family and whatnot, right? And so if we can meet on that level and say like, and these families need homes, y'all. How do we do that together? Finding that connection, finding that level, finding that information that we can all springboard from together.
So we're about at time. If you think you can do it quick, our last question there, Matthew, is what's your vision for the city? And as mayor, what do you feel your roles to bring that vision to reality? If you can give it to us in about a minute or two, then.
Yeah, right on. So mainly that first one is transparency. I want to make sure that people feel like they have access to decision makers and that their opinions are heard. Making sure that we can open up all of the meetings available to public broadcast and podcast so folks can listen when they are available, opposed to 10 a.m. or a lunchtime meeting downtown, right? On a weekday, who's going to make that? Also allow for commentary at those, so that way we can have people place their concerns at the committees making the decisions. So that way people can then tune into a podcast maybe and hear them actually vetted, discussed, instead of just, that's a great idea, we'll talk it over, and then summarily dismissed. On top of that, doing that bottom-up housing development, right? Focusing on creating those low barrier, low income, high density units, like that Tyler building, or the Tyler land we got from Lane County Fairgrounds. We need to make Aurora building style, maybe put childcare on the bottom. That way we can help address one of those missing pieces of our housing puzzle. There's also my Green New Deal. I'm very excited about this. Again, I was talking about the Hynix plant. We need to find unused factories, find grant money for manufacturing, and then develop solar panels there, develop batteries there. Right now, there's the tariff that Trump put into place, or sorry, this administration put into place to try to increase solar panel production domestically. And so while it's going to sunset far too soon for us to really transition quick enough and get enough investment quick enough to make that a booming sector of our economy, it definitely gives us opportunity to find funding now. Oil just dropped down to negative $37 a barrel, y'all. People are divesting of those contracts. Now is the time to strike for investors in solar for the US. I don't like the word opportunity zone because it's sad that we got to bait vulture capitalist in for investing. Transparency, housing, Green New Deal, bunch of other ideas, education bolstering. Check out www.yookformayor.com.
All
Number
right.
4.
Good. I was going to ask you for a plug for your website before we finished up. So I think that's it. Do you have anything else, Anne?
No, just thanks for coming on and talking about your platform.
Oh, definitely.
All right. Well, Matthew, good luck. And like I say, hopefully this will help people to know a little bit more about you, help them make a little bit more informed decision. Again, these interviews are not an endorsement of any candidate. ESSN and Solidarity Action Network are both nonpartisan, and we do not endorse candidates on the
C4 style.
local, state, or federal levels. But we do want people to know who's running and what you guys are all about. So thank you again for coming. We really appreciate it.
Of course. I hope I did well. And again, if y'all have any questions, please send messages.
Definitely. All right. You have a good day.